Hi, this is Roger Green, host of the Surfing the Next Tsunami podcast. We are offering 3 conversations from this week's second preview of the upcoming Digital International Liver Congress 2021. This conversation covers a tremendous amount of intellectual territory in just 11 minutes. Stephen Harrison starts by discussing some of the non-invasive testing research likely to be presented next week, including results from the Litmus Consortium. From there, the group moves through a discussion of late breakers they find promising and, at the end, the papers and presentations they anticipate with the greatest interest. This agenda has stimulated tremendous excitement among our extended Surfing Nash family, so sit back, listen, enjoy, learn, and, when you're done, join the discussion on our LinkedIn and Facebook discussion groups.
Next week, close to 10,000 stakeholders from across the global hepatology community will convene virtually for the Digital International Liver Congress 2021, a 4-day meeting with well over 100 sessions on a broad range of liver-related topics. Today, join hepatology researcher and key opinion leader Dr. Stephen Harrison, liver wellness advocate Louise Campbell, pricing and forecasting guru Roger Green, and this week's guest, hepatology researcher and key opinion leader, Professor Jörn Schattenberg, as they discuss the sessions and papers that interest them most today on the Surfing the Nash Tsunami podcast.
I'll give Louise some props here and just to talk a little bit about a session that is right up her alley and one that is going to be very helpful to the field. And that is this one on the 26th of June shared by Laurent Castera and Michael Pavlidis, and looking at some of these non-invasive tests. You know, Michael, it's great to see Michael get to be a chair of one of these sessions. I remember interrogating him at his DPhil, and he's come such a long way in a short period of time. But we're going to hear the development and validation of Agile-3, which is this novel FibroScan-based score, which it's a step forward. This Agile-3 is a non-invasive test that combines liver stiffness measurement, AST-ALT ratio, platelets, gender, age, and the presence of diabetes. And it's really targeting this more advanced population of patients, F3 or greater. But I think it takes us a step forward, if you will, one step further in our understanding of how to manage these people from a non-invasive perspective, how to diagnose them. And in that session, there's a whole lot of other key papers that are being presented. In fact, 2 from the Litmus Consortium that Jörn and I both are a part of. So it'd be a very interesting session to check in.
Thank you, Stephen. Jörn, anything else you want to comment on?
No, I agree. And the last day on ILC are normally all the highlights, and this is where it right falls in with the non-invasive tests, right together with the late breakers, I guess, which we haven't discussed yet. And Stephen is gonna believe, you mentioned that was the cirrhosis study, that fructofermin. But again, I think that's a great highlight and ending of that exceptional program we're going to see this year.
Jörn, is there anything else on the late breakers you want to comment on? Because I have one comment I want to make on the first general session.
One I was going to direct your attention to, and I sent you that in an email, is a mechanistic study that was actually published in Nature by a German group, and Michael Dudek is the first author, and they took a mechanistic approach to explore the liver immunophenotype in NASH. And we've seen 1 or 2 great studies coming out here, one in the context of NASH HCC, and this one now here looking at CD8 cytotoxic T cells and looking what's going on in that inflamed liver. And it's a deep basic science approach to look at that. What it tells us as a clinician is that really we're getting to better understand the inflammatory phenotype that drives that disease and some autoaggression that's going on in the liver. And really looking forward to that talk to better understand the true pathophysiology of this.
Let me highlight one more and then closing questions. I thought the last 2 papers of the first general session, neither of which is particularly scientific, both I think are really important. First, a paper from the U.S., GS 1072, on food insecurity is associated with all-cause mortality in U.S. adults with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and advanced fibrosis. I don't think that's necessarily a surprising thing in some ways, but it's one of those things that to see proven and demonstrated in this context, I think will be helpful. Aligns, I think, neatly with a lot of the work that Donna does, and Louise, a lot of the work that you do, right? That people who are food insecure don't eat foods that help them. Stephen, you say you can ruin anything by frying it, and I totally agree agree with you, but you can also get more calories out of it that way. And people who are food insecure and don't have a lot of calories, I don't know that they worry so much about the long-term health quality of what they eat, as long as the question is, does it make them hungry? So I'll be interested to see that one. And then the next one is about chronic liver disease and the risk of mortality after COVID-19, retrospective cohort study for 2020. Again, taking a look at the other side of that relationship, I believe, which is what does liver disease say about what happens when you experience COVID as compared to what does COVID do to the liver? Those are two other papers, not necessarily for pure science reasons, but I think for understanding where all this fits in the world at large and the other elements of policy and life that I'll be really intrigued to see.
I'm going to step out of my fatty liver lane and mention one abstract that intrigues me. And that is, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but if I remember right, it's amoxicillin and clavulanic acid, prednisone for the treatment of, was it alcoholic hepatitis?
Yeah, that's right. I don't remember who the author was, but that's right. That was the title.
Boy, that's an interesting combo, because you take the number one drug for drug-induced liver injury in the U.S., Augmentin, and you combine it with prednisone. I'm intrigued by the mechanism behind which the thought was generated that might be a potential target. Jörn, have you seen this abstract?
Yes, it's in your late breaker session on the 26th, and it's the first late breaking oral 2631 given by Alexandre Louise. From my perspective, they just use the high infectious risk these patients have and cope that with a broadband antibiotic and adding on prednisone to avoid the detrimental effects of immunosuppression in those alcoholic hepatitis patients. So I think, they want to get the good side of the antibiotic prophylactic exposure of those patients going on to an immunosuppression. And normally you use the Little score to determine the length of prednisone, but I'll be interested to see how they dealt with that. Maybe they're there to take prednisone longer out, and that's where the benefit kicks in. So, but I'm not sure. Looking forward. I agree. That's a great abstract.
Yeah, my only concern is if you take a sick liver and they're the one in whatever it is that has a DILI problem, well, that's going to be a bit challenging to bring that patient back. But it will be interesting to see for sure. And the good news is I get to listen to that because it's in my session where I have to wake up at, I think it's 3 in the morning, maybe 4 for that particular session. Since I'm going to be up anyway, I'll hear it.
Doesn't the late breaker start at 6? About 5. If you're going to be in Florida? That week?
Yeah.
Yeah, 6. It starts at noon. 6? It starts at noon CET, so it'll be 6 in the morning. You're a lucky guy.
Well, the Panhandle, that's still 5 a.m.
Okay,
That's doable.
Watch the sunrise as you learn about Augmentin and prednisone. I like it.
And go for a run after that last presentation of yours.
That's right. I've got to, chase. I'll be eating fish down there, so maybe I'll eat fish. We'll see.
Anybody have anything they want to add about the meeting before I go to closing question about specific things about the meeting?
I guess I'm still wondering how they get the get together at the meeting and the interaction parts. We mentioned the interactive sessions, but I think there's going to be an element where you can actually reach out and discuss with peers, and I haven't really figured that out yet. So I'll be excited and looking forward to how that's solved.
Jörn, I'm glad you mentioned that. Luca Valenti talked about that when he was on 2 weeks ago in terms of what they've done with the platform. That the platform is actually set up to foster group one-on-one conversations, groups coalescing around issues and just talking offline. So I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I know it's a source of real excitement for the EASL folks. And I agree with you. I think that the ability to generate those conversations will be a tremendous benefit.
I think the only thing I can say is this year, I think it is more inclusive of every speciality, every grade of healthcare professional, from nurses through to doctors. Obviously, there's a nurses and associate healthcare professional session on the 26th, I think it is, the Saturday. But there's lots of bits in between that really cover a lot, and plus patient interest. So I think this is the most diverse meeting that we've seen, and maybe that's because it's virtual, but it's exciting throughout.
So why don't we do this, knowing that we can't break an embargo, but I don't think anyone has to do that to answer this question. Grab your crystal ball, and based on what you know about this meeting, predict what you think will be one of the 2 or 3 big stories that will come out of it, ideally from a fatty liver perspective, but if the one you think matters most has nothing to do with fatty liver, this will be the moment to talk about it. Brave one, go first.
I'll be brave, and this is a big crystal ball that fatty liver disease will be given an independent, non-communicable disease status that lifts it higher in profile and places it with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, up at the top of the World Health Organization's agenda, because as we know, education and preventing liver disease can actually prevent some of those associated conditions. There's my crystal ball. We're going to break new territory with the WHO.
Just in the field of fatty liver, the consensus, the drumbeat is growing louder as there's a sense that we're getting closer toward an approved drug to treat the disease, that we're getting better at identifying at-risk NASH, that we're developing tools that are becoming more recognized as a predictor of therapeutic response, that we have tools that are now coming onto the scene that can predict outcomes. We had this International NASH Day. I think it was huge. It was a huge hit, in my opinion. And I think that groundswell of patient advocacy is going to be one of these tides that raises all boats. I think the general consensus coming out of this meeting is going to be one of, we're going to get where we want to be with fatty liver. But it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I mean, we've seen that with therapies reporting even this year. But I generally think that there's not going to be a new therapy that's FDA approved. We're not going to have some bombshell newscast on fatty liver that comes out of EASL. But I think the totality of the data will be one where people walk away feeling better about where we're headed.
Excellent. Jörn?
And I agree with Stephen on this one. I think diagnostics is really the field where we've seen the most advancement. There's more granularity in the therapeutics field, but the diagnostics are really just skyrocketing. I mean, there are 2 big EU-funded projects. They're joining in a think tank on, I believe, Thursday morning. This is the Litmus Consortium that was mentioned before. And here, really great and groundbreaking work with regards to defining the non-invasive tools we want to use has been made. And then the other one is the Liver Screen project, which does case finding or even uses non-invasive tests to screen in not even high risk, but in the general population. And I think the amount of data that's generated across those large consortium is just gigantic. And that's why non-invasive tests are really stepping out of the meeting for me as being more broadly. We have a better database to understand them. And also the abstract that will be presented from the Litmus Consortium by Michael Pavlidis, as Stephen said, I think there's just so much going on in the diagnostic field.
So I had a coin toss, Jörn, and since you hit heads, I'll hit tails. I think also there's more focus in this meeting than we've tended to see in the past on multidisciplinary issues, not just your session, but sessions that go into cardiology and other diseases. And I believe in the absence of having a lot of medications, which we'll get to but don't have yet, and in the presence of good diagnostics, the more specialties understand why this should matter to them, and the more patients understand about why this isn't simply about a fatty liver, I think the better we'll do at raising the salience of the disease in the eyes of the world. We hope you've enjoyed this recording. If you have any questions or comments about the content of this conversation or the entire episode, please send an email to questions@surfingnash.com. We will be back in the coming week with interviews from leaders in EASL and other key opinion leaders in hepatology, followed by our same-day coverage of the Digital ILC on June 24, 25, and 26. I hope you'll join us then. Until then, stay safe. See you on the podcast. Bye-bye now.